We got the house, right?
Sarah. Sarah! Please open the door, Sarah.
She held my keys like trophies. My daughter-in-law sat across from me in the estate attorney's conference room, my house keys dangling from her finger, catching the light with every small movement. The metal clinked softly as she shifted, and each sound landed like a hammer against my chest. She'd been carrying them for 3 months, ever since she'd convinced everyone I was too confused to manage my own locks. The mahogany table stretched between us, reflecting the stack of documents the attorney was arranging: my late husband's will, trust papers, beneficiary forms, the paperwork of a life reduced to legal language and witnessed signatures. If you've ever sat in a room where someone planned your future without asking, "Stay with me, you're not alone in this." She leaned forward, those keys still dancing in her grasp. She'd driven me here in my own car, using my own keys to hear about my own husband's final wishes. The irony wasn't lost on me, even if it seemed lost on everyone else. The attorney cleared his throat and opened the first folder. My daughter-in-law's posture straightened with anticipation. She'd been confident during the drive over, talking about practical arrangements and smooth transfers. Her certainty filled the car like expensive perfume, overwhelming and inescapable. He glanced at me, then at her, then back at his papers. Something flickered across his face, not surprise, more like recognition. Like he'd seen this exact kind of hunger before. We got the house, right? 3 years earlier, I'd thought my daughter-in-law was helping. Tom had been gone for 2 weeks when she showed up at my door with a casserole and a sympathetic smile. She hugged me carefully, like I might break, and told me she was there for anything I needed. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my son's wife, family. The first request seemed reasonable. "Mom, let me handle the bills this month. You shouldn't have to think about money right now." I was grateful. Grief made everything feel insurmountable. The electric bill, the property tax notice, the mortgage statement. I had always paid those things on the same day each month, the way you water a plant, consistent, quiet, done. But with Tom gone, even opening an envelope felt like choosing whether to breathe. So I handed her my checkbook, thinking it was temporary, thinking she'd give it back once I felt steadier. She never did. Within a month, she'd convinced me to add her name to my bank accounts, just in case of emergencies. She called it a safety net. The bank manager smiled as I signed the authorization forms, the pen heavy in my hand. My daughter-in-law stood beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder, saying the right words in a soft voice. "This is just for convenience, Mom. You're doing great." I signed. After that, small things began to shift. I'd look for a statement and find a sticky note instead. Already handled. I'd ask a question and get an answer that sounded like comfort, but landed like a warning. "Don't worry your head about that. I've got it." By month 3, she was opening my mail before I saw it. Not obviously. She'd bring it to me in neat stacks, already sorted, already decided what was important and what was just junk. The official envelopes, the ones with windows and heavy paper, were suddenly rare. I noticed the bank statements were missing, but when I asked, she laughed it off. "I've been reviewing them for you, Mom. Everything's fine. You don't need to stress over numbers." I started second-guessing everything. Had I always been this forgetful? Had I really forgotten to pay the water bill, or had she just told me I'd forgotten? When she suggested I was getting confused about dates, I wondered if she was right. The paperwork piled up in her car, not mine. The passwords to my accounts lived in her phone, not my address book. My own financial life became something I accessed through her, like a translator for a language I'd spoken fluently for 72 years. Then came the day with the locks. I'd been out shopping for groceries. My weekly Thursday routine, the same route I'd driven for 30 years. I bought the same things I always bought: chicken, tomatoes. The good coffee Tom used to love, even though he was gone. I remember standing too long in the coffee aisle, staring at labels, pretending I was deciding, when really I was trying not to cry in public. When I got home, my key didn't work. I stood on my own front porch, grocery bags cutting into my palms, staring at a lock I didn't recognize. I tried the key again, jiggling it the way you do when you think maybe you're just not angling it right. Nothing. The deadbolt didn't even pretend to turn. I called her. She answered on the fourth ring, bright and unconcerned. "Oh, Mom, I meant to tell you, I had the locks changed yesterday, for security." Security? You left the door unlocked twice last week. I was worried about you. I hadn't left the door unlocked. I was certain. I could picture myself turning that knob until it clicked, because I'd done it the same way for decades. But her certainty was louder than mine, and I was still raw enough to believe, maybe. She arrived 20 minutes later with the new keys, apologizing for the miscommunication, making it sound like I'd somehow been told and forgotten. She handed me one key, just the front door, not the deadbolt, not the back entrance. When I asked about the others, she smiled like she was being patient. "I'll hold on to the full set, just to be safe. You know, in case you misplace yours." I took the single key. I didn't argue. Some part of me was already too tired to fight, too worried that maybe she was right. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe I did need this kind of help. That key sat in my purse like evidence of my own diminishment. After that, the mail situation got worse. I started noticing gaps, whole weeks where nothing arrived, then sudden floods of catalogs and coupon flyers, but none of the official envelopes I used to track. Bank statements, tax documents, investment reports. The silence felt deliberate. When I asked her directly, she sighed. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly these days. Remember? We talked about this. I'm managing your paperwork now." I don't remember agreeing to that. "You did, 3 weeks ago, after you got confused about the property tax deadline." Had I been confused about the property tax? I couldn't remember. That was the trap. The not remembering became its own kind of proof. That afternoon, I saw the postal truck, 2 streets over, and waited. The carrier was someone I'd known for years. "Am I getting mail today?" He checked his scanner, frowned. "According to this, your mail's being forwarded. Has been for about 2 months now, to an address on Maple Street." Maple Street, where she lived. I didn't authorize that. "Says here you signed the form on March 14th. March 14th. I'd been at her house that day. She'd asked me to sign some routine paperwork for my homeowner's insurance. I'd signed 3 or 4 pages without reading them carefully, trusting her explanations, grateful she was handling the tedious details. One of those pages must have been a mail forwarding authorization. I went home and searched through my files. The ones I still had access to. I found my insurance paperwork, filed neatly in the folder where I'd always kept it. No changes. The insurance story had been a lie, just cover for whatever I'd actually signed. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing the sound of that new lock refusing my key. Click, no give. That's when I started keeping notes, dates and times. What she said versus what I remembered. I wrote them on the backs of grocery receipts and stuffed them in my jewelry box, the one place I knew she hadn't claimed. April 3rd, she says I forgot doctor's appointment. I have it written on my calendar. It's April 10th. April 15th, asked about bank statement. She says balance is around $8,000. It sounds low. April 28th. Mail carrier confirms forwarding address. I never authorized this. The receipts accumulated, small proofs that I wasn't losing my mind, that the reality I remembered was the real one. But receipts don't pay bills. And I was starting to realize I didn't know which bills were being paid at all. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday. My daughter-in-law arrived at 10, letting herself in with her keys. She didn't knock anymore. "Mom, I brought groceries. I noticed you were running low on—" "We need to talk about the mail." She paused, a bag of oranges in her hand. "What about it?" "The carrier told me it's being forwarded to your address. I didn't authorize that." Her expression shifted to concern, but something sharper flickered underneath. "Oh, Mom, we talked about this. You were so stressed about managing everything. I suggested we consolidate your mail at my place so I could help you stay organized." "I don't remember that conversation." "I know, sweetheart. That's why I'm helping." The word landed like an insult. She used it the way you'd talk to a confused child. "I want the mail forwarding stopped today." "Mom, I'm protecting you from stress. Do you know how many scam letters you were getting? How many confusing bank notices?" "Those are my letters, my notices. And I'm making sure you don't miss anything important." Every objection I raised, she reframed as proof I needed help. Every assertion of competence became evidence of confusion. "I need access to my own accounts." She set the groceries down carefully. Her voice dropped lower, almost confidential. "I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I'm worried. The memory issues, the confusion about conversations we've had. I think we should make an appointment with your doctor." There it was, the threat. Keep pushing, and she'd build a paper trail that said I couldn't decide for myself. But I thought about the receipts I'd been keeping, the dates I'd written down, the carrier's confirmation. I wasn't confused. I was being confused on purpose. "I'm calling the post office myself." "Mom." "Today." She studied me for a long moment, then she smiled without warmth. "Of course, whatever makes you feel better." She left without putting away the groceries. I called the post office as soon as her car pulled away. The automated system transferred me 3 times before I reached someone who could access the forwarding record. "I need to cancel a mail forwarding order I didn't authorize." "I'll need to verify your identity first, ma'am. Can you confirm the address we have on file?" "My home address is 847 Oleander Drive." A pause. Keyboard clicks. "I'm showing a different primary mailing address. For security, you'll need to come in with ID to request the cancellation." "How long does it take to process?" "Once submitted, it can take 7 to 10 business days to fully update through the system." 7 to 10 days, more than a week of her seeing what I was trying to fix. More than a week for her to prepare. I made an appointment for the next morning. This time, I didn't tell her. I drove myself, a small rebellion that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. At the counter, the clerk had me sign a cancellation request and showed me the forwarding order details on a screen I could barely read through my own pulse. "Can I get a printed confirmation of what's on file? The forwarding address? The start date? Everything?" She hesitated, then printed a single page and slid it toward me. "Oleander Drive, Maple Street, effective date." My name typed cleanly, like consent. I didn't argue. I just lifted my phone and took a picture. Quiet, quick. The tiny camera click sounding louder than it should have. Then I tucked the paper into my purse like it was fragile. That afternoon, I went to the bank. I tried calling first from the car, thinking maybe it would be simple. The automated system asked for a password I didn't know. When I finally reached a person and explained I needed access, they asked me to verify my address. I gave Oleander Drive. "I'm sorry, ma'am, that doesn't match what we have on file. We'll need the account holder to come into a branch with ID." so I walked into the branch I'd used for 30 years. The manager recognized me and smiled, then caught my face and stopped smiling. "Mrs. Brennan, is everything all right?" "I need my statements, all of them, going back 6 months." "Of course," she typed, frowned slightly. "I'm showing your mailing address as Maple Street. Is that correct?" "No, that's my daughter-in-law's address. Mine is Oleander Drive." Her eyes lifted, just for a second, like she understood more than she could say. "That explains why you haven't been receiving statements. Let me update that and print these for you." The printer began stacking pages. 1, 3, 7, 12. She gathered them and handed them across. "If you have questions about these, I'm here." I looked at the top page. Balance, $4,127.42. 6 months ago, that account had held just over $23,000. My husband's life insurance, our savings, the cushion I thought I had. Where did it go? She pointed to the line items, her expression professionally neutral. "These withdrawals were made by the secondary account holder, your daughter-in-law. She was added in early February." Early February, weeks after the funeral, when I'd still been signing things just to make the days stop hurting. "How much total?" She traced down the columns. "Approximately $18,800 over the past 6 months. $18,800. Gone in increments, designed to look harmless. $900 here, $1,200 there, labeled household, medical, repairs. Death by 1,000 quiet cuts. Can I remove her from the account? As a joint holder, she would need to sign. Or you can close this and open a new account in your name only." "And the money?" Her pause told me everything. "That would be a legal matter. If withdrawals were unauthorized, you may want to speak with an attorney." I nodded like I wasn't breaking. "Can you print the full transaction history? Everything since February?" "Absolutely." More pages emerged. Stores I didn't shop at. Restaurants I'd never been to. Online purchases for items I never received. A dismantling, documented in ink. Before I left, she leaned in slightly, voice careful. "These patterns are concerning. If you need resources, we can connect you with our fraud team." I swallowed and nodded again. I drove home slowly, the bank printout sitting in the passenger seat like something radioactive. When I pulled into my driveway, my daughter-in-law's car was already there. She sat on my front steps, my house keys in her hand, waiting, like she owned the entrance to my life. "We need to talk, Mom." Her voice was flat, no sweetness, no concern, just honesty that felt like a threat. I didn't go to her. I went inside, straight to the desk drawer my husband used to keep neat, the one she hadn't emptied yet because she didn't know it mattered. My fingers found an old stack of cards, softened at the edges, and there it was. My husband's estate attorney. His business card was still in the drawer. I didn't tell Sarah I was seeing the attorney. I called my husband's attorney the next morning from my bathroom with the door locked. The receptionist answered on the second ring. "Chen and Associates, how may I help you?" "My name is Margaret Brennan. My husband was Tom Brennan. I found Mr. Chen's card, and I need to speak with him." A pause, then softness in her voice. "Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Chen left instructions for us to contact you if you ever called. Can you come in tomorrow at 2? Expecting me." Tom had prepared for this. "Yes, tomorrow at 2. 412 Madison Street, 3rd floor. And Mrs. Brennan, come alone if you can. Bring your ID if you have it. Anything you're comfortable carrying." I understood what she wasn't saying. The next afternoon, I told Sarah I had a doctor's appointment. She offered to drive me, of course, but I insisted I could manage. "It's just a routine checkup. No need to waste your afternoon." She looked at me, a beat too long, as if deciding whether to push. Then she smiled. "All right, Mom. Call me when you're done." I drove to Madison Street with the bank statements in my purse. Mr. Chen met me in the waiting room, late 60s, silver-haired, with gentle formality. Mrs. Brennan, I'm very sorry for your loss. Tom was meticulous about his planning. Please come in. His office was lined with law books. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Tom set up his estate planning very carefully. He was specific about protections to make sure you'd be taken care of. He pulled out a thick folder. My husband's handwriting on the tab, faded but unmistakable. Tom established a revocable living trust 3 years ago. The house, the investment accounts, assets he wanted protected were placed into the trust with you as the primary beneficiary. I didn't know. He wanted everything documented in case something happened. He was concerned about outside influence. Outside influence. Tom had seen this coming. He turned a page toward me. Dense legal language, but the important parts were plain. Primary beneficiary, Margaret Brennan. Full discretion and control. A date stamp, a notary block. Tabs labeled like a roadmap. Your husband was very specific about protection, Mrs. Brennan. This trust ensures that you, and only you, have control over the assets. No one else can claim them, access them, or make decisions without your explicit written authorization. What about Sarah? She told me she was helping manage things. His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. Sarah Brennan is not listed as a beneficiary in this trust. She has no legal standing to manage, access, or make decisions about Tom's estate assets. No legal standing. Everything she'd done, taking my checkbook, redirecting my mail, changing my locks, she'd done it as if permission could be performed into existence. She's been managing my bank accounts for 6 months. She had me add her as a joint holder. On accounts connected to the trust? I think so. The main checking account, the savings. May I see your statements? I handed them over. He reviewed them methodically, finger tracing the columns of withdrawals. When he looked up, his voice stayed calm, but my stomach didn't. Mrs. Brennan, if these accounts were treated as trust assets, changes to authorized access should have required trust documentation and your explicit consent as trustee. If Sarah convinced you to add her without explaining what you were signing, that can rise to financial exploitation. Hearing it said out loud made something inside me go cold and clear. She took $18,000. I see that. And these descriptions? Household expenses, medical bills, home repairs. Were these legitimate expenses you authorized? No, I didn't authorize any of it. Then we need to address this. Remove her access, document everything, and decide if you want to pursue recovery. What would that involve? Sometimes when people realize documentation exists, they return funds to avoid consequences. Other times we proceed with formal demand letters and, if necessary, court filings. And the house? She has my keys. She changed the locks. The house is titled in the trust. You are the trustee. She has no claim to it. We can restore your access quickly. Locksmith, new keys, and written notices. If she refuses to return property or blocks you, that becomes a legal issue, not a family argument. Legal words for what had felt like betrayal. Tom really planned for this? He came to me years ago. He wanted you protected. He wanted you to have absolute security. The timing stung. He'd been thinking about my safety while I was still trusting everyone to be kind. What happens next? We schedule a formal reading of the will and a meeting to review the trust provisions with everyone who needs notice. That creates a clear record of what Tom actually intended. When Sarah hears the terms read aloud, her position becomes untenable. She'll be there? Everyone who receives notice will be invited. Sarah's name appears for notice purposes through your son, but she is not a beneficiary. When the trust provisions are read, That will be clear. I pictured her in a lawyer's office, keys in her hand, certain the ending belonged to her. How long until the reading? I can schedule it for next week. We'll send formal notices and allow the required notice period. Given what you've described, I want to move as quickly as procedure allows. What do I do until then? Keep documenting, bank printouts, post office confirmation, dates, conversations. Don't tell Sarah about this meeting or the reading. Let the formal notice reach her the proper way. He paused. And Mrs. Brennan, your husband set up these protections so you'd have legal backing when you needed it. You have every right to reclaim your life. Legal backing, that was the difference. Not anger, not drama, paper, procedure, proof. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I'll send the notices once it's scheduled, and I'll have my assistant send you a locksmith recommendation today. You're going to get through this. I drove home with the trust folder in my purse, next to the bank statements. 2 sets of evidence, 2 kinds of truth. My house looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Not just a building Sarah had claimed, mine, protected by law, protected by my husband's foresight. Justice had to be methodical, not emotional. The law was on my side, and the reading was coming. The formal notice arrived 8 days later. I found it in my mailbox, my own mailbox, because the post office had finally processed the forwarding cancellation. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with Chen and Associates embossed in raised lettering that caught under my fingernail when I traced it. It was the kind of mail you didn't casually toss on the counter. It asked to be handled with care. Inside was a single page on legal letterhead. The language was formal, clean, indifferent. My hands shook slightly anyway. You are hereby invited to attend the formal reading of the last will and testament of Thomas Michael Brennan, to be held at 2 p.m. on Thursday, October 19th, at the offices of Chen and Associates, 412 Madison Street, 3rd floor. October 19th, 6 days away. I read the notice 3 times, tracing my finger over Tom's full name, Thomas Michael Brennan, printed in that official typeface. Seeing his name like that felt different than seeing it on a headstone. This was not grief, this was structure. This was the world he'd built out of paper, where intentions became enforceable. I folded the notice carefully and slid it into my desk drawer underneath the trust documents Mr. Chen had given me. Sarah would receive an identical notice. She would know the reading was scheduled, but she wouldn't know what I knew. For the first time in months, I had something inside my house that didn't pass through her hands first. Something that didn't depend on her interpretation. Something addressed to me. I spent those 6 days preparing. Not legally. Mr. Chen had that covered. I prepared the way you prepare for a storm you can't stop. You secure what matters and you decide how you'll stand. I rehearsed in my mind how I would sit, how I would breathe, how I would keep my face neutral when the truth began to surface. I practiced not crying, not gloating, not begging, not shrinking. In a bathroom mirror, I watched my own eyes. I watched my mouth. I trained my expression to stay calm, dignified, unreadable. Not because I wanted to look strong for them, because I refused to give anyone a new excuse to call me confused. Dignity required control. On Wednesday, Sarah called. "Mom, I got a notice about Tom's will reading tomorrow. I can pick you up." "I'll drive myself." A pause. I could hear her recalculating. "Are you sure? It might be emotional." "I'm sure." "Well, I'll see you there." "And Mom, this is just a formality. Tom left everything to you, and I'm helping you manage it. Nothing's going to change. Such confidence, such certainty, spoken the way people speak when they think the outcome has already been decided. I'll see you tomorrow, Sarah." I hung up before she could add anything else that sounded like concern and felt like a leash. That night, I laid out my clothes. A navy dress, simple and dignified, Tom's favorite. the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 30th anniversary. I wanted to look like myself, not the elderly woman struggling Sarah had been describing to other people, but the person I had been before grief and manipulation wore me down. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of Tom sitting in Mr. Chen's office, signing documents, thinking ahead to this exact moment. In my dream, he didn't look sad. He looked focused, like a man building something he might not get to see. Thursday morning arrived, clear and cold. I drove to Madison Street at 1:30, early enough to settle myself. The parking lot was nearly empty. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, breathing, centering, reminding myself of the simplest truth. I didn't need to perform. I just needed to be present. The documents would speak for themselves. At 1:50, I walked into the building. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me up. My reflection in the mirrored panel looked older than I felt, but steadier than I had been. The receptionist led me to the conference room where Mr. Chen was arranging folders in precise stacks. Each folder had a tab, each tab had a label. Watching him work was oddly calming. There was comfort in method. "Margaret, thank you for coming early." "Thank you." "Are you ready for this?" "I think so." Remember, all I'm doing is reading what Tom wrote. The documents speak for themselves. He said it like a reminder, but it felt like a promise. "Who else is coming?" I asked. "Sarah, as your son's widow for notice purposes. Your sister Linda." Tom listed her in his paperwork. "And anyone else required to receive notice. For support, I thought. For pressure. For witnesses." Mr. Chen adjusted one of the folders and looked at me over his glasses. "If anyone becomes disruptive, I'll handle it. You don't have to debate anyone in that room. You don't have to convince them of anything. Let the record do the work." My throat tightened, but I nodded. At 2:00, they began arriving. Linda came first. She hugged me, her arms firm and warm. "How are you holding up?" "I'm all right." Her eyes searched my face, as if looking for the version of me she'd been told about. "Sarah's been saying you're struggling, that she's been helping." "We'll talk after," I said quietly. She squeezed my shoulder and took the seat beside me. Then Sarah arrived, with Jennifer at her side, both of them in expensive black suits that looked less like mourning and more like armor. Sarah's eyes scanned the room in quick, efficient passes. The attorney, the folders, the seating arrangement, me. For a moment, surprise flickered. That I was already there. That I hadn't needed her to get me there. That I wasn't late, disoriented, dependent. She recovered quickly. She crossed to me with a sympathetic smile practiced to perfection. "Mom, how are you doing?" She reached for my hand. I let her take it, but I didn't squeeze back. "I'm fine, Sarah. We'll get through this together." She sat across from me, Jennifer beside her. Sarah placed her purse down carefully, like someone setting a marker on a table. Then she did something that made my stomach tighten. She reached into her bag and pulled out my house keys, the full set, and placed them beside her phone. Not casually, deliberately, like a claim. Like a trophy, like evidence. She polished them absently with her thumb, the same gesture I'd seen a dozen times. Brass catching the light, metal clinking softly when she shifted her wrist. My keys, my house, displayed like something she'd earned. I kept my face neutral and watched her hands instead. In the last few months, I'd learned hands told the truth faster than mouths did. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. We are here for the formal reading of Thomas Michael Brennan's last will and testament and the associated trust documents. This meeting serves as official notice of the estate's provisions. He confirmed identities for the record, asking each person to state their name. Voices in a conference room always sound slightly wrong to me. Too loud, too contained, like everyone is pretending to be civilized while thinking sharper thoughts. Mr. Chen placed one hand on the first folder and looked up. This will proceed in sections. First the will, then the trust documents. Please hold questions until I have completed each section. Sarah leaned forward, eager, confident. She glanced once at the keys beside her phone, then back at Mr. Chen, as if the keys could speak for her. Jennifer leaned toward her and whispered something I couldn't quite catch, only a fragment. Just a formality. Sarah's mouth curved in a small, private smile. She looked at me, and in that look was the same thing I'd been feeling from her for months. Certainty that my life was now something she managed. And she asked the question like she was collecting what belonged to her. "We got the house, right?" Mr. Chen didn't answer immediately. He simply opened the folder, slowly, neatly, and turned the first page. Mr. Chen continued reading, his voice steady, the pages making that dry paper sound as he turned them. Tom established the Margaret Brennan Revocable Living Trust on April 12, 2021. All assets, including the family home at 847 Oleander Drive, investment accounts, and life insurance proceeds were transferred into this trust. He turned the page. The trust names Margaret Brennan as sole trustee and sole beneficiary. Upon Tom's death, all trust assets pass to Margaret with full and exclusive control. No other parties are named as beneficiaries or trustees. Across from me, Sarah went very still. The polishing motion on the keys stopped, metal no longer clicking softly against her ring. Mr. Chen looked up, as if checking the room before he continued. The trust includes specific protective provisions. He read the line about my autonomy, about written consent, about witnesses and notarization. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't need to. The words were already a verdict. The room fell so quiet I could hear the HVAC hum in the ceiling. Then, Mr. Chen flipped to a section with a tab I hadn't seen before. The label was in my husband's handwriting. Block letters, neat. Legacy Addendum. Sarah leaned forward again, a reflex. Jennifer shifted in her chair. Linda's hand tightened on mine. Mr. Chen's mouth twitched, just once, like he'd tried to stop it and couldn't. It was a brief, dry laugh, not unkind, not mocking, more like disbelief at someone who'd walked into a locked room, holding stolen keys, and still asked if the door belonged to her. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What's funny?" Mr. Chen's expression reset to professional calm. "I apologize. I'm simply continuing." He looked back down and read. "Separate from the assets listed above, I maintained a legacy reserve intended solely for my wife's security." Sarah's fingers curled tighter around the keys. Mr. Chen continued, voice even. "Upon my death, $4 million shall fund the Margaret Brennan Legacy Subtrust for Margaret's exclusive use and care. This distribution is private by design and does not pass through any other beneficiary." A sound came out of Sarah that wasn't a word. A sharp inhale, like her body had pulled in air to argue and found nothing ready. Mr. Chen turned another page. No spouse of any descendant is named in this subtrust. No in-law is granted standing, authority, access, or control. Sarah's eyes flicked down to the keys beside her phone, then back up too quickly. "Wait, where does it mention me?" she demanded. "Where does it say I'm not included?" Mr. Chen didn't raise his voice. "Mrs. Sarah Brennan, your name does not appear as a beneficiary in the will, the primary trust, or this legacy subtrust." The sentence landed like a stone in still water. The ripples were visible on every face in the room. Jennifer's hand stopped midair, halfway to her coffee cup. Linda's grip on my hand became protective, like she was holding me steady through a wind. Sarah tried to smile, but it didn't form correctly. But Mom needed help. She was confused about bills, managing the house. I was helping. Mrs. Sarah Brennan, Mr. Chen said, firm but controlled. The trust documents are clear. Mrs. Brennan is sole trustee. No other party has legal authority to manage trust assets. But I have account access. I've been managing her money for 6 months. Mr. Chen nodded once, as if she'd just pointed at the exact problem. That brings us to the documentation. He pulled out another folder. I recognized it. The bank printouts I'd handed him. The ones that felt radioactive in my passenger seat. He didn't shove them at Sarah. He didn't accuse. He simply placed the pages on the table and turned them so everyone could see. Mrs. Brennan consulted with me and provided records showing approximately $18,800 withdrawn from accounts designated as trust assets. The access was added on February 8, 2024, 3 weeks after Mr. Brennan's death. He looked at Sarah. Did Margaret sign documents that resulted in you being added as a joint account holder or authorized signer? Yes, Sarah said quickly. I drove her to the bank. She signed. Did you explain to her that these were trust accounts? That changes required trustee authorization in the form laid out in the trust? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. Her jaw worked silently. I was helping her. She was grieving. She couldn't think straight. Mr. Chen didn't react to the insult. He slid one more page forward, thinner, more official looking than the statements. This is the bank's authorized signer change record and signature card copy they provided. It shows the change request submitted on February 8th. It shows the mailing address changed to Maple Street. And it shows the trustee authorization section left blank. Sarah blinked hard. Those are just forms. They are forms that exist for a reason, Mr. Chen said. The trust requires written consent properly witnessed and notarized for changes to trust assets. There is no such authorization in the file. He let the silence do what it always did in a room full of witnesses. Then, very quietly, so that would be no. Sarah's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. I was taking care of her. Someone had to. She couldn't manage on her own. Mr. Chen turned to me. Mrs. Brennan, did you authorize Sarah to withdraw $18,800 from your accounts? Every eye in the room turned toward me. My heart beat once, hard, and then steadied, like my body recognized this moment had been coming for months. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. I did not authorize those withdrawals. I didn't even know about most of them until I went to the bank. Mom, you're confused, Sarah snapped. We talked about this. The house repairs, the medical bills. What house repairs? I cut in. There were no house repairs. The roof, the plumbing issue. There was no plumbing issue, Sarah. There was no roof work. I live in that house. I would know. Her composure fractured. Her voice rose. You're not remembering correctly. This is exactly why I needed to help. You can't keep track. I can keep track just fine, I said. I have the statements. I have the transaction descriptions. Restaurants I never went to. Stores I never shopped at. Online purchases for items I never received. All signed off under your access, not mine. I was managing things for you. You were stealing from me. The word dropped like a stone. Sarah went white, then red again. I would never, how dare you, after everything I've done. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Mrs. Sarah Brennan, unauthorized withdrawals from an elderly person's trust assets may constitute financial exploitation. Mrs. Brennan has the right to seek recovery. If this cannot be resolved privately, the next steps may involve formal demand and legal action. Sarah pushed back her chair. The scrape against the floor sounded ugly in the quiet. This is insane. Mom, tell them. Tell them I was just helping you. I looked at her, really looked. Not the role she played. The person underneath it, calculating, panicked, still trying to turn my certainty into a symptom. You changed my locks, I said, redirected my mail, told me I was losing my mind every time I questioned you, took $18,000 while telling me I was too confused to manage my own checkbook. I swallowed once. That's not help, Sarah. That's abuse. I was protecting you. From what? From living my own life? Sarah's hands shook. She looked at Jennifer, frozen, then at Linda, disgusted, then back at the keys, like they were the last thing she could still hold. The house, Sarah said, desperate now. At least, I have the keys. I've been maintaining the property. That has to count for something. Mr. Chen's answer was immediate. The property at 847 Oleander Drive is titled in the trust. Mrs. Brennan is sole trustee and beneficiary. You have no legal claim to the house and no right to possess keys or access the property without her permission. Sarah's hand moved toward the keys like she might snatch them back into her purse. Sarah, I said. Her hand stopped. Those are my keys to my house. I'd like them back, now. For a long moment she didn't move. I could see the math happening behind her eyes. Options, risks, what she could still salvage. Then her fist closed and pulled back from the keys like they'd burned her. This is unbelievable, she said, after everything I've done. I didn't ask you, I said. You took it. You convinced everyone I couldn't manage because you needed me to be powerless. I reached across the table and picked up the keys. The full set, deadbolt, back door. The brass was warm from the overhead lights. They felt heavier than metal. They felt like a boundary. I believe these belong to me. Sarah stared at me, cycling through shock and rage and disbelief. You'll regret this. When you can't manage, when you need help. I'll be fine, I said. I've always been fine. You just needed me not to be. Mr. Chen stood. Mrs. Sarah Brennan, we will prepare documents requiring you to cease all access and acknowledge no legal claim to trust assets. If you cooperate on returning the withdrawn funds, this can remain private. If not, Mrs. Brennan will pursue legal remedies. Sarah grabbed her purse. Jennifer scrambled after her. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah snapped as she reached the door. She doesn't want my help. Fine. She turned once, eyes sharp. Good luck managing everything yourself, Mom. Then she was gone. The silence afterward felt like air rushing into a vacuum. Linda let out a breath I think she'd been holding for years. Mr. Chen sat back down and made a note in his file. That went about as expected, he said calmly. Mrs. Brennan, I'll prepare the paperwork to revoke access formally and notify the bank. We'll also send a certified demand for the withdrawn funds with a return deadline. If she refuses, we proceed. I nodded, still holding my keys. My hands weren't shaking. My voice hadn't wavered. I had spoken the truth in front of witnesses, with the record on the table. And I hadn't apologized for existing. Dignity and documentation had won. Linda squeezed my shoulder. You okay? Yes, I said, and I meant it. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't bracing for the next correction. I had my keys back. I had my life back. And everyone in that room had heard the truth. The silence after Sarah left felt enormous. Linda let out a long breath. Lord, Margaret, that was a lot. Mr. Chen closed his folders methodically, stacking them in order like he was putting the room back together. Mrs. Brennan, I'll prepare the formal revocation documents today. We'll notify your bank immediately to remove Sarah's access from all accounts. I'll also draft a certified demand letter for the withdrawn funds with a 30-day deadline. If she refuses, we can file a civil claim. I nodded, still holding my keys. Solid metal in my palm, not a symbol anymore, something real. What do I do now? First, we secure everything. I'm calling your bank before close of business today to flag the accounts and revoke her authorization. That takes effect immediately. Then the property, rekey the locks, reset access. Finally, we document every step. She won't return the money, Linda said quietly. Mr. Chen's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. Probably not voluntarily, but a certified letter with a paper trail changes people's calculations. He slid a business card across the table. This is the locksmith I mentioned. Call today. Tell him I referred you. He'll prioritize it. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Tom made my job easy, he said simply. He planned well. Linda drove me home. We didn't talk much. Everything important had already been spoken in that room. When we pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same, and yet it didn't. Do you want me to come in? No, I need to be alone for a while. She hugged me hard. I'm proud of you. It wasn't guts, I said. It was documentation. It was both, she said, and kissed my cheek like she wouldn't argue with me today. I unlocked my front door with my own keys, all of them. The clicks sounded like borders being redrawn. Inside, the quiet hit me first, then the evidence. Sarah's coffee mug in the kitchen, her jacket on the hook, a stack of mail on the hall table, already opened, already sorted by someone else's hands. I didn't throw anything. I didn't slam cabinets. I just gathered. Mug, jacket, mail, a few small things from the guest bath. I set them in a box and carried it to the garage, placing it by the interior door like a boundary you could see. If she wanted her things, she could ask. Properly, with witnesses, with daylight. The locksmith came the next morning at 8. Frank was in his 60s, kind eyes, efficient hands. He didn't ask for the story twice. Mr. Chen called me yesterday. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Thank you. He rekeyed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, deadbolt, side entrance, garage. New keys, smooth turns, clean clicks. He handed me 3 sets. One with you, one somewhere safe inside, one to someone you trust completely. I thought of Linda immediately. As Frank filled out the invoice, he wrote a note at the bottom in block letters and showed it to me before he tore off my copy. All changes require written authorization from Mrs. Brennan. So if anyone calls claiming to help, he said, I don't touch your locks without hearing from you directly. My name on paper, in someone else's records, it felt stabilizing. The bank was next. Patricia saw me and waved me over before I even reached the line. Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Chen called. Sarah's access has been removed from all accounts. She can't view balances, can't withdraw, can't authorize anything. What if she tries? The system denies her. And we notify you. We've also restored your mailing address to 847 Oleander Drive. She slid a printed profile across the desk. My name, my address, my authority. Anna, we also flagged your accounts for exploitation monitoring. If unusual activity occurs, we verify before processing. Thank you, I said, and my throat tightened on the last word. Not everyone gets help in time, Patricia said softly. I'm glad you did. Over the next 2 weeks, the truth moved through the family like weather. Linda told her daughters. They called, apologizing for what they hadn't seen. My cousin Ruth called, guilt thick in her voice. Don't, I told her. Sarah was convincing on purpose. Jennifer called once too. Margaret, I didn't know about the money. Sarah told me you agreed. I didn't agree to anything. I believe you, she said, and sounded like she meant it. Then after a pause, she's angry. She's telling people you're being manipulated by an attorney who wants your money, that you'll regret this. The same story she'd needed all along. I won't regret it, I said. I know, Jennifer whispered. Sarah didn't come back to the house, not once. Her box stayed in my garage for a week. Then Mr. Chen's assistant arranged a pickup time. Linda stood with me in the driveway while Sarah's friend loaded it into a trunk without looking at me. No apology, no goodbye, just the sound of a car door closing and an engine pulling away. 2 weeks later, Mr. Chen called. Mrs. Brennan, Sarah retained counsel. They responded to our demand letter. Her attorney, they're claiming the withdrawals were authorized and that you have memory issues. They've refused to return funds. I stared at my kitchen table, at the new keys lying there like quiet witnesses. What happens now? We file a civil complaint. It may take months, but we have strong documentation, bank records, trust documents, your testimony. Will I have to see her? Yes, but you'll have me there, and the record, that's more powerful than her story. I hung up and sat very still. Some relationships couldn't survive the honesty. That was okay. What I couldn't allow, what I wouldn't allow, was for her to turn memory into a weapon again. If she couldn't take my money, she would try to take my voice. So that night, I opened a clean notebook and wrote my first rule. The months that followed taught me what peace actually looked like, not the absence of conflict. The civil case was still pending, still measured in deadlines and stamped filings. Peace was something else, clarity. I knew who I was. I knew what was mine. I knew who I could trust. Linda and I had lunch every Thursday, not because I needed supervision, because we enjoyed each other. She never spoke to me like I might break. She treated me like an adult who could make her own choices. That was the difference. Holidays became invitations, not obligations. I hosted Thanksgiving because I wanted to. Ruth came. Linda and her daughters came. My neighbor Helen brought her apple pie. We laughed over old stories, and nobody questioned my competence. Nobody helped by taking anything from my hands. Christmas was quieter, just Linda and me, old movies and hot chocolate. I chose peace over performance. When people asked why I didn't just let it go, I didn't debate. I let the court calendar do the talking. Any contact went through my attorney. No one entered my home without asking. On what would have been Tom's 75th birthday, I sat in the garden he planted 30 years ago. The roses were blooming, stubborn and bright. I touched the keys in my pocket, my keys to my house, on my terms. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel managed. I felt free. Months later, the civil case settled. Sarah agreed to return $12,000 of the $18,000 she'd taken. Not everything, but enough to mark the truth in ink. More importantly, there was a record now. What happened was real. It was wrong, and it carried consequences. I'm telling you this not for sympathy, but for recognition. If something feels familiar, if someone is helping in ways that feel like control, if you're being called confused when you're not, if your mail disappears or your accounts are managed without clear consent, trust that feeling. Your signature still has power. Your name on your accounts, your deed, your life still means something. Documentation matters. Legal structures matter. And there are people, attorneys, bank staff trained to spot exploitation, agencies tasked with protecting elders, who can help you put the facts on paper. If this story resonated, please share it with someone who might need it. And if you've lived something like this, tell me in the comments. Your voice might be the receipt someone else needs.